Have you ever poured your heart into something, into someone, only to find that the one thing you thought would always be there, your family, turns out to be the very thing that pulls you down? I was that person. The one who thought love and sacrifice for family were enough. That no matter how tough life got, it was okay because I was giving. I was doing what needed to be done. I thought if I just did enough, they'd see me. They'd appreciate me. But what happens when your love isn't enough? When your sacrifices are taken for granted? When you're told, in the coldest way possible, that you don't matter anymore? I used to believe that dedication would eventually be rewarded, that family was something you could never lose, no matter how hard things got. But what happens when your family writes you out of the will, after everything you've done for them? What happens when you've been the one holding everything together, only to be told you don't even exist in their eyes anymore? This is my story. A story about realizing that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away. Not because you don't love them, but because you love yourself more. I remember the weekend like it was yesterday. Every Saturday, I'd head to my parents' house in Salem, Oregon. It wasn't just a visit. It was routine. Helping my mom with her bills, fixing things around the house, checking up on Dad, doing everything to make sure the home they'd built was still standing. Felt like my second home. And in many ways, I guess it was. But that Saturday, when I sat down at the dining table to go through the paperwork my mom handed me, I had no idea what was about to happen. My eyes fell on that thick, cream-colored envelope labeled estate plan and will. It was a simple thing, really. Part of the process that we all deal with, right? But when I opened it, everything I had believed about family, loyalty, and sacrifice, it all shattered. The house, the savings, the car, everything they owned was all going to my sister Samantha. Not a word about me. Not a single line that acknowledged the years I'd spent keeping everything from falling apart. It was right there in black and white. And I felt a tight pressure in my chest, the kind of pressure you get when the weight of a lifetime of expectations suddenly crushes you. But that wasn't even the worst part. When I asked my mom about it, she tried to smooth it over. I just wanted Samantha to feel secure, she said. But what about me? The one who had carried their weight, who had spent sleepless nights making sure everything stayed intact. What about all the times I worked 2 jobs just to make sure the house wouldn't slip into foreclosure? What about those years? Those sacrifices? That moment, something inside me snapped. The calm I had always maintained, the dutiful daughter who put everyone first, was gone. And in its place was something more powerful: clarity. This isn't just my story. It's a story that so many people can relate to. The moment you realize that the people you've been giving everything to might never appreciate you in the way you deserve. And that realization changes everything. You know, there's something we all grow up believing, that no matter what, family will always have your back. It's something we're taught from the moment we're old enough to understand what family means. You're raised with this idea that loyalty, sacrifice, and dedication to your family will eventually be rewarded. That the love you give will be returned in some way, even if it's not always immediate. For me, that's exactly how it was. I thought I could count on my family, that all my sacrifices would one day make them see how much I loved them. I was the one who always stepped up, the one who quietly carried the weight without ever asking for anything in return. I worked 2 jobs, made sacrifices in my own life, all to make sure my parents had what they needed. And for a while it felt like I was doing the right thing. After all, it was family, right? What else could matter more than that? But the truth is, sometimes family doesn't see the sacrifices you make. Sometimes they don't realize that you can't keep giving and giving until you have nothing left to give. I thought my dedication would eventually be enough, but it wasn't. That's where the story takes a turn. Because it wasn't until I found the will that everything I had done, everything I believed, was completely shattered. When you're the one everyone relies on, it can feel like you're both the glue and the lifeline. That was me. For years, I had been the one who always showed up, the one who took on the extra load when things got tough. Whether it was picking up groceries for my parents or staying up all night to help them with their paperwork, I was always there. But it wasn't just the small things, it was the big stuff too. I'm talking about the kind of sacrifice that makes you question if you've lost yourself in the process. I worked 2 jobs, barely slept, all while helping my parents manage their home. I fixed the roof last winter after a heavy snowstorm. I drove across town in the middle of the night to make sure my mom had her medication. And when my dad's car broke down, I was the one who drove him to work for weeks. And through it all, I never once complained. Just felt necessary. Felt like the right thing to do because family is supposed to take care of each other, right? But when it came time for me to need something, when I was looking for just a little acknowledgement for all that I had done, it became clear that the roles had reversed. I wasn't just helping anymore, I was expected to help. There was no gratitude, no appreciation for the late nights, the lost time, the missed moments. It wasn't enough that I was the one holding everything together. I was just expected to do more. That's when I started to wonder, when does helping become enabling? When do we stop being the lifeline for others and start becoming the ones left behind? I've always been the one to keep things organized, to make sure everything was in order. It was second nature to me, like checking the bills or making sure my mom's medications were up to date. So when I went over to my parents' house that Saturday, it wasn't unusual that my mom asked for help with some paperwork. What was unusual, though, was what I found. While sorting through a stack of papers she handed me, my eyes landed on a thick, cream-colored envelope labeled Estate Plan and Will. At first, I thought it was just another set of forms we'd need to keep track of. But when I opened it and started reading, something in my chest tightened, and the world around me seemed to fall away. There, in black and white, was the decision that would change everything. My parents had left everything to my sister Samantha. The house, the savings, even the new SUV, and yes, even my mom's wedding ring. It was all for her. Not a word, not a single mention of me beyond the vague line, "We love both our daughters." My hands started to shake, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I had given so much. Paid off their mortgage, repaired the roof, fixed plumbing, kept the house running when it felt like it might fall apart. I did all of that because they were my family, because I loved them. And yet, I wasn't even worth a mention in the most important document of their lives. I couldn't stay calm. I stood up, the will still in my hand, and turned to face my mom, who had re-entered the room. "Mom, is this real?" My voice felt like a stranger's, tight and sharp, trying not to break. She froze. Her face was a mix of guilt and uncertainty, and she stammered, "Well, Hannah, it's not like that." That was when I realized, it was like that. All those years of sacrifice, the long hours, the quiet moments of care, all of it meant nothing. I was just another line in a will that was already written with someone else in mind. I couldn't stay in that house any longer. The anger, the confusion, it felt like it was consuming me. I walked out to the porch for a moment, took a deep breath, and then went back inside, determined to get some answers. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking, "why didn't you mention me in the will? After everything I've done for you and Dad, why is Samantha the only one who gets everything?" My mom's face flushed, her hands trembling as she fumbled with a vase on the table. "Oh, Hannah, don't overreact. You know, I just wanted Samantha to feel secure. She's still figuring things out." I couldn't hold back a bitter laugh. Still figuring things out. She's 30 years old. She can't even hold down a job for 6 months. And yet, she gets it all? I didn't let her finish. I cut in, each word heavy with years of pent-up frustration. "I've spent years paying off the mortgage, fixing the roof last winter, delivering your meds when you couldn't get out of bed. I'm the one who kept this house standing. And I get nothing." My voice broke, but I quickly steadied myself. "What about me, Mom? What about all the things I've done? You've never once acknowledged it. I gave up my own life to help you, and this is how I'm repaid." At that moment, my dad walked in, as casual as ever, holding a coffee mug in his hand. He didn't even glance at the papers. He just sighed, looking at me as though it was any other day. "You don't need to react like this, Hannah. You're doing fine. Samantha, she's still figuring things out." Figuring things out. I wanted to scream, but instead I just stood there, staring at him, feeling like I was watching two strangers, not my parents. How could they not see it? How could they be so blind to everything I had given up? I placed the will back on the table, my hands cold as I did so. The paper that had crushed me just moments ago now felt like nothing more than a piece of trash, something that didn't deserve to stay in my hands. "Thanks for showing me where I really stand," I said, turning toward the door without another word. I heard nothing behind me, no apology, no explanation. Just silence. And for the first time, it wasn't the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of acceptance. I walked out and didn't look back. The days after I found the will felt like a blur. I told myself I needed space, needed time to think. But deep down, I already knew the truth. The truth that I'd been avoiding for so long. I wasn't going to get anything more from them. The love I had given, the endless sacrifices, none of it was ever going to be acknowledged in the way I needed it to be. So I did what I thought I could never do. I stopped. I stopped answering their calls, stopped helping, stopped carrying the weight that wasn't mine to bear anymore. First, it felt like a relief. I didn't have to scramble to fix things. I didn't have to sacrifice my own peace for theirs. I could breathe for the first time in years without the looming responsibility of being the family's fixer. But then the calls started coming in. "Hey Hannah." It was my dad, casual as ever. "The mortgage is due this month. Can you transfer the payment?" I stared at the screen, the words burning into me. It was as if nothing had changed. No mention of the will. No acknowledgement of how they'd hurt me. It was just another demand. Just another request for me to save them. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel the overwhelming urge to jump in and make things right. I had always been the one to help, to rescue, but now I had to take a step back. I typed out a message, my fingers moving slowly but surely, each word clear and deliberate. "I think Samantha can handle it. That house is hers now, right?" I hit send. And then I waited. It didn't take long for the next message to come in. My mom, of course. "Hannah, don't do this. We need to talk." But I didn't respond. I had nothing left to say. I wasn't angry, I wasn't sad, I just felt empty. But in that emptiness, there was a strange kind of peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you've made the right choice, even if it's the hardest one you've ever made. The silence that followed my decision was both freeing and unnerving. For weeks, there were no calls, no messages, just the stillness that filled the gaps where I once found purpose. And at first, it felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. But then, I began to hear things through the grapevine. It wasn't just silence anymore. It was the kind of silence that can only be filled with other people's words. My mom, the woman who I'd spent years caring for, had taken to social media. She posted about her broken heart, and how I had abandoned them. There were pictures of the house, the one I had helped keep standing, and the caption read, "Sometimes the ones you love the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest." Then came the flood of comments. Family members, old friends, people who hadn't been around for years. They all rallied around my mom. The messages were full of sympathy for her, expressing disbelief at how I could walk away so easily. And as the posts kept coming, I felt a strange knot in my stomach. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was more like relief. Relief because I had been strong enough to make a decision that, no matter how painful, was necessary for my own well-being. But it also made me realize something about myself, something I hadn't wanted to admit. I had been conditioned to believe that being the good daughter meant constantly sacrificing my needs for the sake of others. That my worth was tied to how much I gave, how much I fixed, how much I did. And yet, as soon as I stopped, I was painted as the villain. It's funny how quickly people can judge you. How easy it is to make someone the bad guy when you stop playing the role they expect of you. It wasn't just my mom's posts that stung. It was the realization that no one ever cared about why I stopped helping. No one seemed to ask, "Is Hannah okay?" All that mattered was that I wasn't doing what they wanted anymore. But in all of this, one thing became clear. I wasn't going to let their guilt or shame control me anymore. I had to choose what was best for me, and that meant not responding to the noise. Now imagine yourself in Jessica's shoes. After everything she did for her family, after the years of giving without a second thought, she finally makes the hardest decision of her life, to stop supporting them. No more sacrifices, no more putting them first. She chooses herself. How would you feel if you were in her position? Would you have done the same thing, or would you have tried to keep helping despite the pain? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let us know how this decision made you feel. Do you think she was too harsh, or was this the only way to truly protect herself? Your voice matters, and we want to hear what you think. After weeks of silence, something inside me finally snapped. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the truth. I had spent so many years in the shadows, silently carrying everyone else's burdens. But no more. I had to take back my voice. If I didn't, who would? That's when I decided to speak up. I logged into my social media accounts, something I hadn't done in weeks, and began typing. Every word felt like it was coming from deep inside, from a place I'd hidden for far too long. I shared the truth. I shared the receipts, bank transfers, the mortgage payments I'd made, the utilities I'd covered, the bills I'd paid. I even posted a screenshot of the will, showing Samantha as the sole beneficiary. I knew the moment I hit post that there was no turning back. This was my declaration, not of revenge but of freedom. I didn't do it for sympathy, I didn't do it to shame them. I did it because I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't responsible for everyone else's story. I wasn't responsible for how they chose to perceive me either. The truth was now out in the open, and I no longer had to carry the weight of their narrative. I remember how the comments started flooding in almost immediately. At first, they were just a trickle, friends and family expressing surprise. "I had no idea you'd been doing all of this, Hannah," some wrote. Others, who had known me for years, chimed in, admitting they had seen how much I had given but never truly understood the extent of my sacrifices. For the first time, people saw me for who I truly was. Not just the daughter who always fixed everything, but someone with her own needs, her own life, her own voice. And that was the part one had been missing for so long. The truth was liberating. I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't afraid to be the person I needed to be. And as I read through the responses, it became clear to me. This wasn't just about standing up to my family. It was about standing up to the version of myself that had been silenced for too long. Once I hit post, I didn't wait around to see what would happen. For the first time in ages, I felt like I could breathe again. No more checking my phone every few minutes. No more wondering if I had made the right choice. I had told my side of the story, and now it was time to let go. The next few weeks were a blur of peace. Real peace, the kind that comes from no longer carrying the weight of other people's expectations. I started doing things I hadn't done in years. I enrolled in an online photography class, something I had always wanted to do but never allowed myself the time for. I took long walks, just for the joy of walking, not to run errands or check off tasks. For the first time, I was living for me. But as much as I enjoyed my newfound freedom, I still had that lingering feeling that something was missing. That old nagging voice that told me I wasn't doing enough, that I wasn't being the daughter my family expected. And then one day it happened. My mom called. I didn't answer. I couldn't answer. I had already said everything I needed to say. The following days brought more of the same. Messages from my mom asking for help with bills, messages from Samantha asking for just a little bit of help with this, or the house is getting to be too much for mom and dad to handle. But this time I didn't feel guilt. Felt relief. I knew what I had to do, and it wasn't this. It wasn't being their savior. I spent that time focusing on myself, finding out what I really wanted to do with my life. My savings account, which had always been drained by my family's emergencies, started to grow. For the first time, I wasn't holding my breath, waiting for the next financial crisis. I was free to do whatever I chose with my time and my money. I thought the hardest part was over. I had made my decision, stepped away, and found a new rhythm to my life. I had no more guilt weighing me down, no more constant sense of obligation to fix everyone else's mess. But just when I thought I was finally free, the phone rang again. It was my mom. I didn't pick up. She left a message, but I didn't listen to it right away. I had already been through this cycle so many times, the same request for help wrapped in the same pleading tone. And that's when it hit me. As much as I had let go, there would always be that nagging pull, that little part of me wondering if I should be the one to help, to step in. After all, they were family, right? But this time I didn't second-guess myself. Instead, I scrolled through my messages, my thoughts clear, and then it hit me even harder. They didn't just want me to help. They expected me to help. They had never learned to stand on their own because they always knew I would be there to fix things. And that was the key moment, the moment I realized that I had never given them the chance to take responsibility for themselves. It wasn't about being cruel. It wasn't about not caring. It was about teaching them the same lesson I had learned the hard way. You can't keep sacrificing yourself for people who don't learn from their mistakes. I decided not to respond. I let their messages sit there, unanswered, unread. And it felt right. Because this was their journey now, not mine. They would have to face the consequences of their actions, just as I had faced the consequences of mine. As the weeks went by, something unexpected began to happen. I realized that, in letting go, I wasn't just walking away from my family. I was walking toward something far more important: myself. For the first time, I could breathe deeply without feeling like I was holding everything together, without wondering if I was doing enough. I was no longer carrying the weight of years of unacknowledged sacrifices, and that lightness, that freedom, was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I started doing things that had been on my to-do list for years but always got pushed aside. I took that photography class I had always dreamed of but never allowed myself to explore. I spent time doing little things that brought me joy, like cooking my favorite meals, walking in the park without a care in the world, or simply sitting in my favorite cafe, listening to the rain and reading a book. I began living for myself, not for anyone else, and it felt good. The truth is, I hadn't just let go of my family's expectations. I had let go of the version of myself that thought I had to earn love and respect by endlessly giving. I had been taught that family meant sacrifice at any cost, but I realized in time that family should also be about respect, mutual care, and boundaries. And then, one day, I received another message from my mom, asking for help with something trivial, but I knew the pattern all too well. Instead of feeling obligated, I simply let the message sit. It wasn't about cruelty. It was about letting them face the consequences of their actions, just as I had done. I had already learned my lesson. I wasn't responsible for fixing things anymore. As time passed, I found myself no longer looking back. The family drama that once consumed me began to feel like a distant memory, something that didn't define me anymore. I wasn't waiting for an apology or a change that might never come. I had stopped trying to fit into a narrative that wasn't mine. Instead, I began to embrace the freedom that came with choosing my own path, with building a future that was truly mine. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when doubt crept in, when I wondered if I had made the right choice, or if I was too harsh. But every time I thought about going back, about falling into the same patterns of sacrifice and self-neglect, I remembered how far I had come. I had reclaimed my own life, and it felt like a gift I had given to myself. I started focusing on the things I had pushed aside for so long. I traveled to places I had always wanted to visit, not because anyone expected me to, but because I wanted to. I took up new hobbies, connected with people who made me feel seen and valued, and allowed myself to be the person I had always hoped I could be. Someone who was whole, independent, and free. One of the biggest lessons I learned through all of this is that letting go isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing. It's about choosing yourself when the world around you demands everything but that. It's about realizing that you can love your family, but you don't have to lose yourself in the process. And sometimes the hardest part is knowing when to stop being the one who fixes everything, when to walk away, and when to give others the space to face their own challenges. That is where true growth begins. When we stop carrying others' burdens and start allowing them to carry their own. Thank you so much for watching and taking the time to hear Jessica's story. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes, the hardest but most empowering thing we can do is choose ourselves. Family isn't about just giving and giving without being valued. It's about mutual respect, boundaries, and self-care. What do you think the biggest lesson is from Jessica's journey? Was it really about letting go of her family? Or was it about learning to love herself more? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share your feelings in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, Don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more real, powerful stories. Thank you again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.